Hello everybody and welcome to our first video on teratogens. Teratogens are substances that are dangerous to the baby during pregnancy, and that's because they can cause abnormal fetal development. And common effects of many teratogens include fetal loss. Some of them will simply lead to a miscarriage or a spontaneous abortion. They can also cause growth restriction, birth defects, and impaired neurologic function. There are many mechanisms by which teratogens can harm the baby, and in most cases, the mechanism by which the teratogen works is incompletely understood. I've listed some of the proposed common mechanisms on the screen here. It's unlikely you'll be asked much on the Step 1 exam about the mechanism of teratogen damage to the baby because it's often not known. But what they will want you to know for the Step 1 exam is that the greatest risk is when the fetus is exposed during the first trimester. This is called the embryonic period, and this is when the organs are forming. So exposure to a teratogen during this period can cause an organ to fail to form or to form abnormally. After the embryonic period, the organs are growing in size, and it's less dangerous if the baby is exposed to a teratogen. Even within the first trimester, the effects of a teratogen on the fetus can vary depending on when the fetus is exposed. If the fetus is exposed in the first 2 weeks, this is called the all or none period. In this period, usually the teratogen either causes a spontaneous abortion or it causes no effect on the baby at all. Between weeks 2 to 8, organogenesis is occurring, so this is the time period when exposure to a teratogen can result in a structural defect. And then after 8 weeks, all the organs and limbs are formed, so a teratogen can cause decreased growth. It sometimes causes central nervous system dysfunction, but it usually does not lead to a birth defect if the exposure is after week 8. All the items I've listed on this slide are potential teratogens. In this video, we're going to focus on drugs that a mother may take during pregnancy that can damage the baby. In the second video on teratogen, I'll talk about all these items here. And then finally, I have a separate video on the porch infections, which are dangerous to the baby during pregnancy. So certain drugs are dangerous for mothers to take during pregnancy because they can harm the baby. So how do we know this? It wouldn't be ethical to randomly expose pregnant women to drugs to see what happens to the baby. So the way we determine that drugs are dangerous during pregnancy is first by animal testing. The FDA in the United States requires that all drugs be tested on animal models. Usually this is rodents or rats. Now, even though a drug may appear safe in rodents or rats, sometimes after a drug is brought to market, evidence will appear that it's harmful to the baby. So this appears via case reports. So the second way that we know drugs are dangerous are if case reports begin to appear that women taking a drug have problems with the baby during pregnancy. The FDA labels drugs with a letter to indicate their level of safety in pregnancy. Category A drugs have been shown to have no risk to the fetus even when taken by humans. These are the safest drugs to use in pregnancy. Category B drugs are drugs that have been shown to have no risk to fetus in studies other than human studies, for example, animal studies. Category C drugs are intermediate. In these drugs, risk cannot be ruled out. Category D drugs are drugs where there is positive evidence of risk. And then finally, Category X drugs are absolutely contraindicated in pregnancy. These are drugs that are known to be teratogenic in animals and humans, and the risk clearly outweighs the benefits. The difference between Category X and D is that D drugs are sometimes used in pregnancy in situations where the mother has a very strong indication. Category X drugs are never used in pregnancy. They're absolutely contraindicated. Now let's talk about specific classes of drugs, and I'll begin by discussing the ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers, or ARBs. Both of these classes of drugs are used to treat hypertension and heart failure. They both interfere with the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Both classes of drugs are pregnancy class D. In the first trimester, they've been associated with lots of different congenital malformations. They're unlikely to ask you about a specific malformation on the Step 1 exam. But what they'll want you to know for the Step 1 exam is in the second and third trimester, these drugs can cause oligohydramnios. That is decreased amniotic fluid in the womb. The reason these drug classes can cause this is because they interfere with the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, and that can affect the fetal kidneys. So this can lead to decreased fetal kidney function and even fetal renal failure. And it is the urine from the fetal kidneys that creates the amniotic fluid in the womb that serves as a cushion. So if a pregnancy leads to oligohydramnios, that baby can lose its cushioning in the womb, and that can lead to Potter syndrome. I discussed Potter syndrome in the renal video in Embryology, but it involves pulmonary hypoplasia and limb and skeletal deformities, all caused by loss of cushioning in the womb due to decreased amniotic fluid, and that is associated with ACE inhibitor or ARB use in the second and third trimesters. All anti-seizure drugs have some teratogenic potential, and this is a big problem for some women in pregnancy because if a woman has epilepsy, she often needs to take anti-seizure medication while she is pregnant because obviously a seizure would be dangerous to her and the baby. All anti-seizure drugs can potentially affect the fetus in a number of ways. One of the most common ways is to lead to a neural tube defect in the baby. But in addition, these drugs have been associated with other problems in the baby like congenital heart disease and cleft palate, short fingers, and abnormal facial features. On this slide, I've listed the 4 seizure drugs with the highest teratogenic potential, and among these 4 drugs, valproic acid in particular is associated with a significantly increased risk of neural tube defects. And if you've watched a neurology video on neuroembryology, in that video I talk about the fact that women often take folic acid during pregnancy because low folic acid levels are also associated with an increased risk of neural tube defects. And it turns out that many anti-seizure drugs are also associated with low levels of folic acid in the mother and the baby. So because folic acid levels, when they are low, can lead to neural tube defects, and because many seizure drugs lead to neural tube defects, high-dose folic acid supplementation is often given to women who have to take a seizure drug during pregnancy. There is a syndrome called the fetal hydantoin syndrome that is associated with phenytoin use in pregnancy. Phenytoin is a version of a chemical substance called a hydantoin, and the syndrome that results when mothers take this in pregnancy is called the fetal hydantoin syndrome. First of all, these babies are born very small, they have growth deficiency, and then they have a number of abnormal facial features. One of the classic ones is a cleft lip and palate. They also have a very small head that's microcephaly, and they also have abnormalities that involve the nose, eyes, and ears. Chemotherapy drugs are highly teratogenic during pregnancy. This should make sense to you. These drugs target rapidly dividing cells with the goal of killing cancer cells, but if they're given to a mother who is pregnant, they can target the rapidly dividing cells in the baby. Unfortunately, in some rare circumstances, women develop malignancy when they're pregnant. In particular, Hodgkin lymphoma sometimes occurs among women who are pregnant. Now, ideally, if the cancer is of a low grade, you can defer chemotherapy until after birth, or at least until the 2nd or 3rd trimester when the baby is out of that embryonic period. If chemotherapy has to be given in the 1st trimester, fetal malformations are very common, about 15%, when born to women who receive chemotherapy in the 1st trimester. The highest risk agents in pregnancy are the alkylating agents and antimetabolites. I talk about both of these drug classes in the hematology videos on chemotherapy, but both of these drug classes disrupt DNA function, so you can imagine how damaging that can be to the fetus growing in the womb. They have a number of adverse effects on the fetus that have been described. First of all, they can lead to a spontaneous abortion, but a classic effect of these drugs is missing digits in the fetus. This is a picture of that on the screen to help you remember it. In addition, though, they've been associated with lots of other fetal anomalies. Isotretinoin is a derivative of vitamin A, and it's used to treat acne. It is pregnancy class X. Women who become pregnant while taking this drug have a 20% risk of having a miscarriage or spontaneous abortion. Among women who do carry their baby to term, embryopathy is present in 20 to 30% of the live births. This includes abnormal facial features like low ears and wide-spaced eyes, also congenital heart disease and hydrocephalus. So the key point here is that women who are taking this for acne must take birth control, and this is a big issue because women who take this drug are often teenagers or young women who are sexually active, and they need to understand that there are severe consequences if they become pregnant when they're on this drug. So primary care doctors and dermatologists who prescribe isotretinoin often prescribe birth control at the same time to women who wish to take this drug to improve their acne. And just like isotretinoin, a vitamin A derivative, is teratogenic, vitamin A, when taken in excess dosages during pregnancy, is also teratogenic. Women who take very high dosages of vitamin A in the 1st trimester can cause harm to the baby. Often this can lead to a spontaneous abortion, but it can also cause microcephaly and cardiac anomalies, very similar to the problems that occur in women who take isotretinoin when they're pregnant. Now, in order for this to happen, women have to take vitamin A at dosages several times the recommended daily allowance. So this really only happens in women who take mega dosages of vitamin A. Methotrexate is a drug that inhibits folate metabolism. It has a chemical structure very similar to folate, as shown at the bottom of the screen. It's used as an anti-inflammatory in many autoimmune conditions. It's also sometimes used as an anti-cancer drug. Methotrexate is pregnancy class X. In fact, it's used to induce abortion in ectopic pregnancies. And if you know that, it's an easy way to remember how dangerous this drug can be to the baby. If mothers take this drug during pregnancy and they do not have a spontaneous abortion, the baby is often born with neural tube defects, and that's easy to remember if you know that low folate levels are associated with neural tube defects, and this drug works as an anti-folate drug. And decades ago, when methotrexate or another anti-folate drug called aminopterin were given during pregnancy, this resulted in babies that were born with a characteristic embryopathy. This included neural tube defects, but also a number of other abnormalities like abnormal skull and face shape and cleft palate and hydrocephalus and limb anomalies. And so because all of these things can happen if mothers take methotrexate during pregnancy, it is no longer administered during pregnancy. Warfarin is an anticoagulant that I discuss in videos in the hematology section. It is pregnancy class D. Through its blood-thinning effects, it can lead to fetal hemorrhage, which can cause a spontaneous abortion. It's also been associated with vision problems via optic atrophy in the baby. And then finally, women who take this drug during pregnancy have babies that are born with a characteristic warfarin embryopathy. This includes a number of bone and cartilage abnormalities. One of the classic findings on X-ray is the presence of stippled epiphyses. These are small, round densities on X-rays seen in the bones. If you look at this X-ray here, you can see all these white dots near the top and bottom of the two bones shown in the image. Those are stippled epiphyses, a classic finding of warfarin embryopathy. Other findings also involve the bone and cartilage. These are things like nasal hypoplasia and limb hypoplasia. Methimazole is a drug used to treat hyperthyroidism. It is pregnancy class D. First of all, it can disrupt thyroid function in the baby. This can lead to fetal and neonatal hypothyroidism. In addition, it's associated with a number of fetal anomalies. The classic one is aplasia cutis. This is absence of a patch of epidermis on the scalp. Usually it's a solitary defect of the scalp in about 70% of cases. And in a board question, they will describe a baby born with a missing patch of skin or hair. When you hear that description, you should think that the mother may have taken methimazole. Now, methimazole is a very effective drug for hyperthyroidism in pregnancy, so it's sometimes used in the second or third trimester once the baby is out of that embryonic period. But in the first trimester, it is not used, and the drug of choice in the first trimester is propylthiouracil. It's a related drug that's slightly less effective, but it's safe in that embryonic period. Lithium is used in psychiatric disorders. It's pregnancy class D. Its teratogenic effects primarily involve the heart, and the classic congenital anomaly in a baby born to a mother who took lithium when she was pregnant is Ebstein's anomaly of the tricuspid valve. This is a drawing of it shown on the screen here. In Ebstein's anomaly, the tricuspid valve is displaced toward the apex of the right ventricle, and I discussed this in more detail in the cardiology videos on congenital heart disease. There are a number of antibiotics that are dangerous in pregnancy. I'll highlight just a few of them in this video. The aminoglycosides can cause permanent deafness in the fetus, just like they can cause ototoxicity in adults. Tetracyclines accumulate in the fetal teeth and long bones, and they can lead to permanent discoloration of the fetal teeth. And the fluoroquinolones can cause fetal cartilage damage, and therefore they are not used in pregnancy. Trimethoprim is a drug that disrupts folate metabolism in bacteria, but it can also disrupt folate metabolism in the fetus. And just like we've talked about before, when babies have low folate levels, this can lead to neural tube defects. And then finally, the sulfonamides can displace bilirubin from albumin. This can lead to kernicterus, which is permanent brain damage from high bilirubin levels when babies are exposed to high bilirubin levels after birth. I'll finish this video with two drugs that really aren't used much anymore in the modern era. They're largely of historical significance. The first one is thalidomide. Thalidomide is a drug that is pregnancy class X. It is rarely used in the modern era to treat multiple myeloma. However, in the 1950s, it was commonly given to pregnant women as a sedative, and their children were born with numerous limb deformities. They had amelia, which is absence of a limb, or micromelia, which is short limbs, or sometimes they had phocomelia, which is abnormal limbs. This is a picture of a baby born to a mother who took thalidomide, and these children born with these defects were called the children of thalidomide. They were all born in the 1950s. And if you like rock and roll and listen to Billy Joel, he has a song called We Didn't Start the Fire, and in that song he sings about the children of thalidomide. He is referring to the children of mothers who took this drug. Diethylstilbestrol is a non-steroidal estrogen. This is its structure shown on the screen here. It functions like an estrogen, but it does not have a four-ring chemical structure. And decades ago, it was used to prevent miscarriage and premature birth in pregnant women. However, it was removed from the U.S. market in 1971. The reason it was removed from the market is because, first of all, there was a slightly increased risk of breast cancer for the mothers who took this drug. But more importantly, the female babies of mothers who took this drug had numerous reproductive tract abnormalities. So girl babies born to mothers who took DES during pregnancy often have a small or hypoplastic uterus. They also often have a small or hypoplastic cervix. In addition, they have what's known as vaginal adenosis. These are little nodules on the wall of the vagina. They're caused because of epithelium from the cervix or endometrium that develops in the vagina. This is metaplasia of the endothelium in the vagina so that it becomes more like cervical or endometrial epithelium. And when you look at a biopsy specimen of vaginal adenosis, what you see is endothelium that looks like it came from the cervix or endometrium, but it's found in the vaginal wall. This is believed to be caused by persistent Müllerian tissue in the vaginal wall after birth. And then finally, these girl babies born to mothers who took DES are at increased risk for vaginal clear cell carcinoma. So remember that this drug was taken off the market in 1971. So the girl babies born to mothers who took this drug are now in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and many of them are followed closely by their gynecologists because those women are at increased risk of this malignancy because their mother took DES when she was pregnant. In addition, as you can imagine, because these women often have a small uterus and cervix, there's a high rate of infertility among women who were born to mothers who took this drug. And that concludes our first video on teratogens.